What's up guys, my name's Brandon and the M4 MacBook Air is one of the best Mac values in recent memory. It's fast, it's quiet, it's light, and most importantly, it can be purchased for under $1,000. For most people, this seems like the obvious choice, but there's a catch because the M4 MacBook Pro isn't just a faster version of the MacBook Air. It quietly solves a few real-world issues that the Air still struggles with. And depending on how you use your MacBook, the MacBook Pro might actually save you money in the long run. So in this video, I'm going to discuss my experience switching from the M4 MacBook Pro to the M4 MacBook Air after about 2 months of everyday usage. Okay, so first off, I've been on the base model train for a while now, and it's no different with the M4 lineup. So I have the base model, the cheapest M4 MacBook Pro you can get, and I also have the cheapest M4 MacBook Air that you can get. And you can see those spec differences on screen right now. And the most noteworthy difference here has to be the price because there's a $600 price gap between the 13-inch MacBook Air and the 14-inch MacBook Pro. But one of the big advantages of the Air this year is that it has the same base RAM as the MacBook Pro. So they both have 16 gigs of RAM. However, the MacBook Pro does have double the SSD storage at 512 gigs. That would be an extra $200 for the Air. Anyways, we're not going to focus too much on specs throughout this video. I just want to make this more of a real world comparison between the Air and the Pro. So the first thing you'll notice visually with these two is the design and the color. So the M4 MacBook Pro, I got this in space black. It does also come in the standard silver color that we all love. And then the M4 MacBook Air comes with this new sky blue color, which is my favorite MacBook color, by the way, in a long time. And it also comes in starlight, midnight, and silver. And if you look at the design itself, like the overall body, just look how much thinner the MacBook Air is. Now there's only a 1-inch difference in the display size, but looking at them side by side, you can see how beefy the Pro looks. And if you open the lid, you can see how they stack up next to each other as well. Now the keyboard is about the same, but there are a few differences here. The first one is very minor, but a lot of people miss this one. The mute key now has a slash through the speaker glyph icon. I know that's going to change your whole keyboard experience, but that is a change, difference in between these two. And then also, this one's more obvious. There's also speaker grills on both sides of the Pro, which leads to better audio quality over the MacBook Air. And here's a speaker comparison so you can hear the difference yourself. Now also both the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro have the same new 12 megapixel center stage camera setup, but the MacBook Pro has studio quality microphones. It's a 3-mic array. Both of them have a 3-mic array, but the MacBook Pro has studio quality microphone. So here's a comparison of the video and audio quality, and you let me know which one you think sounds better. Okay, so we're testing out that 12 megapixel center stage webcam on the MacBook Pro and on the MacBook Air. So we're looking to see which one looks better, but also which one sounds better since the MacBook Pro does have better speakers. So let me know in a comment down below which one looks and sounds better to you. Now, of course, the best thing about the MacBook Air is going to be its weight. It is noticeably lighter than the MacBook Pro. I cannot stress this enough. If you're using a MacBook, you're most likely going to be taking it on the go. You're going to be holding it in your hands. It's going to be in your backpack. And like I said, you're going to notice a big difference in the weight saving. So it is 20% lighter than the Pro. And that's something, again, you will notice on a daily basis. It doesn't really seem like much, but you will notice that on a daily basis. Again, I've used these two side by side for a while now, and that makes a huge difference when traveling. Like I've just noticed that I instantly go for the MacBook Air when I'm packing up my bags. Even if I know I'm going on a work trip and I'm going to need to be doing some video editing, I just go for the MacBook Air because of its ease of use. And of course, its smaller kind of frame, it fits better in that airplane tray. And the MacBook Air is also fanless. So the MacBook Pro has a fan inside to help keep it cool, but that also adds weight. light and noise. The MacBook Air is just always silent. And speaking of silence, if you want to silence those spam text messages and phone calls and also remove your personal information online, today's sponsor Incogni has a solution for you. Incogni helps you clean up your name online, and that's more necessary than ever before because new data brokers and people search sites pop up daily, and they're collecting and selling your personal information and posting it online for anybody to find with a simple Google search. And this includes information like your address, your phone number, even login credentials, and more. I used to get a ton of random spam text messages and emails until I got my information removed from all these people search sites. And thankfully, I never had anybody show up at my house or had my identity stolen, but I'm sure that has happened many times before since all this data is so easily accessible. And Incogni's automated system works around the clock, reaching out to data brokers on your behalf to request the removal of your personal data. And it's dead simple to use. You just create an account, you tell Incogni what data you want removed, and you sit back and let their system do its thing. And anytime I talk about Incogni, I just want you guys to go to Google yourselves and just put in your name and maybe like your age or your phone number or something like that and see, if your name pops up. And if it does pop up with some of your personal information, you need Incogni. And thankfully for you, you can get 60% off an annual plan by using my special link below or using code Butch at checkout. Now here's an area where I strongly prefer the M4 MacBook Pro over the MacBook Air, and that is with connectivity. Because yes, it has the same two Thunderbolt 4 ports on the left as the Air, but it also has a third Thunderbolt 4 port on the right, along with an SD card slot and an HDMI port. Now, as somebody who relies on an SD card like for all my creative work, that is a huge downside for the MacBook Air. You can always get an adapter or a dongle or something like that to hook up, but nothing beats a built-in SD card slot on a MacBook when you're on the go. Also, that right side Thunderbolt port has come in clutch many times when I need to connect more accessories or if I just don't have a long enough charging cable to reach that left side. But these are just some of the design compromises that you're going to have to make if you want to spend less money and get the cheaper MacBook. There's going to be compromises, and with connectivity, that's been the biggest downside, in my opinion, for the MacBook Air. But I have to say that the only time that the weight, the fans, the heat, really anything related to design doesn't matter is if you're using your MacBook as a desktop, meaning that you have it hooked up to a monitor at all times. And that leads me right to where the MacBook Air really impressed me this year, and that's because the M4 MacBook Air now supports two external displays with up to 6K resolution with the lid open. So you don't have to have it in clamshell mode anymore for that like you had to on previous MacBook Airs. So basically you can hook up your MacBook Air to two external monitors and use the actual MacBook display as the third display if you want to. Now the M4 MacBook Pro on the other hand can do the same while also supporting much higher quality displays like 8K monitors. But chances are if you're even considering a MacBook Air, you don't have an 8K monitor. So the real bigger difference here compared to the Air is that the Pro supports 144 Hz refresh rate when hooked up to a 4K monitor via the HDMI port. Okay, so external displays aside, let's talk about the built-in display because there's another big difference here between the Air and the Pro because, this year there's a new feature, there's a new technology that's never existed before on the MacBooks, and that is nano texture. The nano texture display is a matte screen that minimizes reflections and glare, and I am personally a major fan of this display, especially because I live in Florida and I'm constantly working outside on a patio where the sun comes in and just causes glare on my screens. But even when I'm in a coffee shop or an airport lounge or, just really any well-lit area, the reflections and glare that you get on a MacBook screen can be very distracting and very annoying. And nano texture eliminates those distractions by muting the reflections and glare by like 90%. Like it doesn't fully get rid of it, but it heavily mutes those reflections and those glares, so much so that it doesn't really distract you anymore. Now, unfortunately, the nano texture display is not available on the MacBook Air. It's only available on the MacBook Pro for an extra $150. But that's not the only major difference with the display because the MacBook Pro also has a mini LED display with a 120 Hz refresh rate. And meanwhile, the MacBook Air just has the regular LCD display with a 60 Hz refresh rate. And I have to say, because I've said this many times before, unlike on the iPhone and sometimes on the iPad, the difference in the refresh rate is not nearly as noticeable, at least not for me. Like, you do notice the smoother scrolling on the MacBook Pro when you're scrolling like super fast on a web page, but for average everyday tasks, I've really never been able to tell a massive difference like I can on the iPhones and the iPads. Like, I'm never usually scrolling super fast on a web page. I'm usually trying to read it, so I don't know. I don't really see a big difference in the refresh rate. I think the bigger difference here is just that mini LED technology and the colors that it provides. You're just going to get better color density on the MacBook Pro. Like, it's just going to be sharper and the colors pop more, just as you'd expect. It's also really noticeable in low light with those blacks. You get that really pure black versus like a really, really dark gray sometimes. So if you watch a lot of videos and movies on your MacBook, this alone also might be a big enough difference to where you might consider the MacBook Pro over the Air because of that color density. And if that, that kind of gets multiplied when you bump up the brightness, because the MacBook Air only gets up to 500 nits, while the MacBook Pro gets double that at 1,000 nits. And it also gets up to 1,600 nits when watching HDR content. So just like I said before, the brightness is very important for me down here in Florida. I need every nit of brightness I can get, and it's a substantial difference between these two when you're in a well-lit area like a studio, or of course if you're on a patio outside. Honestly, just using these day to day, you're really not going to tell a huge difference between these two. Like, that may be a hot take. People may come after me in the comments, but again, I came from using the MacBook Pro for a long time to the MacBook Air, and it's really hard to tell a difference. Like, when I'm just traveling and I'm just watching whatever, like, yes, I notice a small difference, but is it the end of the world? No, it's not. So honestly, the MacBook Air's screen is just fine. I think the biggest difference here is the brightness. That's the only time, in my opinion, where you're gonna really regret maybe not having a Pro. Like, the colors, again, they're fine. They're better on the MacBook Pro, but day to day, I think the brightness is gonna be the big difference here. And that's something that you should take into consideration. Now, speaking of the brightness and going outside, let's talk about portability and traveling with these MacBooks, because there's not much different here other than what we've said in years past. But it's still worth mentioning that the 13-inch MacBook Air is just the king of travel. It fits perfectly in the airplane tray. It's like a feather in your backpack or when you're carrying it by itself, and it'll really never make a lot of noise because there's no fan inside. Now, I don't want to downplay this. The 14-inch MacBook Pro can also fit in airplane trays just fine. I've had no issues with this fitting in the airplane trays. Again, it is just going to take up a bit more space. It is going to be a bit heavier, especially if you're, carrying it in your hands when you're getting on or off the plane or whatever, or if it's in your backpack, you will feel the difference. But in terms of portability and actually fitting in there and using it in that tight space, it's going to be just fine, just like the 13-inch MacBook Air, just going to take up a little bit more space. And I have to mention this as well because I have used the 15-inch MacBook Air and also the 16-inch MacBook Pro, but really neither one of those fit that great in that tight, crammed space like when you're in, on an airplane or something like that. So I've just, the 15-inch fits better. Obviously, the 16-inch MacBook Pro, in my opinion, is just too big and too heavy to even consider for traveling. Like, yes, you can do it, obviously, but it's just not a preferred choice, in my opinion. I actually stopped buying the 16-inch altogether because it's just so big and cumbersome. But if you're using it for a home office, I think the 16-inch is fine because you will have the best performance and the best cooling and things like that. But on the go, it's just not the best. Now, as far as performance goes, both the M4 MacBook Air and the M4 MacBook Pro use the M4 chip, and both come standard with 16 gigs of RAM, so there won't be a massive difference until you move on to the M4 Pro and the M4 Max chips, which are on the MacBook Pro only. Now, we're not going to talk too much about the M4 Pro or the M4 Max. I will have a whole video talking about which MacBook to buy where I cover the M4 Pro and M4 Max if you're interested in that. But in this video, we're just comparing the base model to the base model. So for everyday use, the MacBook Air holds its own, and it's going to be, just breezing through almost any task that you throw at it, especially if you just use it to, 90% of the time, just browse the web or use web applications like Figma. But of course, the MacBook Pro remains the top choice for sustained performance with intensive applications like Blender, Xcode, and Lightroom. And notice how I didn't say Final Cut Pro there, because I've been using the MacBook Air for Final Cut Pro, even intense Final Cut Pro, projects with, M plugins and things like that, and it's performed just fine. I really expected the MacBook Pro to be like so much better. It's really not that much better than the MacBook Air. Again, you're going to really get that much better performance from the M4 Pro and M4 Max chips, not really the base model M4, at least not in Final Cut Pro for me. Like, yes, the MacBook Pro is going to be smoother when you're scrolling on the timeline, and it is going to be faster when you're exporting, but again, it's not a major difference that's worth multiple hundreds of dollars in my opinion. Now, as far as software development and running local LLMs, I think for either of those workflows, you'd be better off with a MacBook Pro, since those will benefit from a fan, and really any extra power you can get is going to be nice when you're doing something intensive like that. And if you're really into LLMs, you probably want to look at the M4 Pro or M4 Max MacBook Pro. And since we're on the subject of the performance here, we have to talk about the heat management as well, the thermals, because the MacBook Air does tend to get a bit more toasty than the MacBook Pro under heavy load, since of course it does not have a fan to cool it down, but it never really gets so hot that I can't have it sitting on my legs. It doesn't burn my hairs off on my legs like the past MacBooks have, Intel MacBooks specifically. But yeah, it gets hotter, but it's really not a huge difference. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know what I always say about lithium ion batteries, and that is that heat is the #1 enemy of lithium ion batteries. So if you made an assumption right now about which one got better battery life, you would probably be right. Apple rates the MacBook Air for 15 hours of web browsing and the Pro for 16 hours. But in my usage, I don't even notice an hour difference between the two unless I'm doing something intensive for at least 30 to 45 minutes. Then the MacBook Pro starts to outshine the Air. And if you watch videos on your MacBook, the Pro will get a few additional hours of battery. So it's 18 versus 24 hours, a pretty big difference on paper there. And really, these days you almost never consume your entire MacBook battery in a regular single day. I constantly come back to my MacBook within the next day to maybe 3 days, and I still have juice left. So I really try to not pay too much attention to how much I use in a single day, because I usually get more than just 1 day of battery life. Unless I'm traveling and I'm not able to charge a lot and I'm doing really intensive things, usually, I do notice that the MacBook Pro lasts a little bit longer, but it's not a huge difference. And again, it's really spread out over multiple days. So with all that being said, should you buy the M4 MacBook Air or the M4 MacBook Pro here in 2025? So I would say that if you're somebody who travels often, and again, you don't really need the tip-top performance, you don't need the SD card slots, you don't need nano texture or the 120 hertz display, and if you mainly just do light work, get the MacBook Air. The M4 MacBook Air is easily going to be the best choice for you. This is honestly the perfect travel companion. The performance is excellent, it's lightweight, makes a big difference over time, and in my opinion, this new sky blue color is stunning. Again, it's my new favorite MacBook color, period. Also, the slightly larger version of the MacBook Air, the 15-inch model, is a great choice if you want that bigger display, but you don't want to break the bank getting a big MacBook Pro. And like I said earlier, do not underestimate the power of the MacBook Air. It's not a Pro, but it performs better than any previous MacBook Air, and it's more noticeable on the M4 in my opinion than any previous year. And maybe it's the RAM upgrade, maybe it's the M4 chip, I'm not sure, but this is the biggest year-over-year difference in my opinion for the MacBook Air in terms of performance and just overall the whole package. And in reality, most people will never need the full power of the MacBook Pro like you needed in years past. Even when M1 came out, I really recommended the MacBook Pro because, I just thought that it would last longer and it would just be the one to get if you needed any type of performance, even with video editing and things like that. And that pretty much held true. I think the MacBook Pro was still a better buy back then, but these days, I just think the MacBook Air is going to be the best choice for the majority of people. But like I said early on in the video, it's not all about the performance and the battery life. It's also about practicality and what you use your MacBook for. Because like I said, you might actually end up spending more by buying a MacBook Air than just buying a MacBook Pro. And that's because you don't need to buy things like dongles. You don't need to buy extra storage. You don't need to buy all these extra things because the MacBook Pro comes with that. Again, we have that extra USB-C port. You have that SD card slot, the HDMI. You have the more storage. So things like that are what you have to take into consideration here with the MacBook Pro. And also, I just think the MacBook Pro is going to be the ideal choice. The M4 MacBook Pro is going to be the ideal choice for those who need a workhorse MacBook to also take on the go, or especially if you just use it in the office with external displays. It's really hard to not recommend the MacBook Pro for those users, since you won't care as much about the practicality as you will the performance and of course the connectivity. And plus you get the nano texture display along with the better colors and that 120 hertz refresh rate, things like that are going to really appeal to the more specific user. Not really as much an average consumer, I think, is going to be the kind of recommendation to get the M4 MacBook Pro. So if the display, the connectivity, and the performance are your three benchmarks, the three things that you care the most about, get the M4 MacBook Pro over the Air and do not look back. Now for me personally, I will be keeping both the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. I know this is not something that you guys are going to do. I'm I'm not trying to, say that you should do that. It's not what you should do. I review these for a living, so I have to, be up to date on them. But the reason I'm keeping both, I'm just going to kind of give you some insight into how I use them in my day, because this may help you figure out, what to use them for. But I just found, or which one to choose, I should say. I just found that the MacBook Air, I find myself going for this every single day when I'm kind of having a leisurely day. I just want to work outside or work at a coffee shop. MacBook Air every single time, no second thought about it. Or even when I'm traveling and I'm going to be doing some light work and I need to have my computer with me to edit some videos, respond to emails, things like that. Again, the MacBook Air is going to be the way to go. I will miss the, nano texture display. I do miss that in certain conditions, but the practicality of it and the more simple it is, the better for me. Like I just value simplicity and just things being lightweight and just compact and just easier to travel with. That's what I like the MacBook Air for. But when I know that I'm going to need to do more work and I'm going to need to access that SD card slots, I'm going to need to access that additional USB-C port for my external SSD, like when I'm going to WWDC or when I'm going to CES or something like that, that's when I do bring the M4 MacBook Pro, because I will need to squeeze every ounce of performance and battery life out of it. And of course, I know I will be working at all times, so I do love having that nano texture display and of course the best color profile that I can for my color grading with videos. So I hope that helps you figure out which MacBook you should choose here in 2025. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you choose the MacBook Air or did you choose the MacBook Pro? Let me know your thoughts and tell me why. Also, do you like this sky blue color or the space black color better? I'm also curious about your thoughts down there. But anyways, guys, hope this video helped you out. If it did, give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future MacBook comparison videos like this one. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.